Hello, peoples. Please try to really hear what I am saying here. And please do not have the normal response where you try to find some excuse to deflect the information I'm about to share with you. That is a normal psyche to protect the ego psyche, to protect your current belief systems at all cost. It is a self-defense mechanism actually that kicks in. So people find ways to deflect information. But what I'm going to say is on the news channel Democracy Now!, their YouTube podcast, they aired an episode where they had a famous black man read Frederick Douglass's speech he gave when he was invited to give a speech at a Independence Day, 4th of July celebration. And of course, he let them have it on how it meant nothing to him because their independence wasn't applied to the slaves in the United States. But anyway, I commented in that feed that people should not just hear what the gatekeepers want you to hear from Frederick Douglass. They should read all of his writings that are not taught in public schools. Because, I quote, Frederick Douglass said, "I escaped chattel slavery only to find myself immersed in political slavery." And Frederick Douglass also said, "When my master allowed me to work off the farm and then confiscated most of my wages, I found that worse to be worse than chattel slavery." Well, I had people say, that's not worse than chattel slavery. What they don't understand is that when you work under the whip, you have no expectations of personal gain. And when he was allowed to work off the farm and actually earn money, he thought he was going to have personal gain. He was going to get somewhere, have his own money. But he found when that was taken, it was worse than working without any expectations at all, which is actually saying that income tax, the master taking the fruits of your labor, is worse than working with absolutely no expectations of personal gain. So I also have people say, he escaped slavery. He wasn't a slave no more, and he became very, very successful. Well, you know what? If you were a slave during that time period, and one of your fellow slaves got the job in the main house, in the big house, as the personal servant and butler to the slave master, all the other slaves would have said, "Look how successful Thomas is. He gets to sleep in the big house in a nice, comfortable bed. He gets to fill his plate from the master's table instead of having to eat the food they prepare for us. Look how successful Thomas is." But they would ignore the fact that he is still a slave. And this is what the person did to try to say, oh, he escaped slavery and he became successful. They're ignoring the fact that he escaped chattel slavery and became a political slave, a slave of government. And he was still a slave. He realized after he escaped slavery, he was still a slave. He just had a different set of masters that ruled from on high. It's called political office. Yeah, and income tax is the equivalent of what you have today. Well, let's say this. When he said, "I got to work off the plantation, then my master seized most of my earnings. I found that to be worse than chattel slavery." That is the equivalent of what you have today with these so-called temp services, that you can barely get a job without these days without first going to a temp service. And they are basically agents of the master who rent out the government slaves to corporations. They get a share of your earnings, and then the government takes a share of your earnings through taxation. It is the same basic principle as the slave owner leasing his slave out to another plantation and then taking his money. Yeah, that's what temp services do. You are no more a free man than Frederick Douglass was when he was working under the whip. I hope you can comprehend this and not try to find some way to deflect it and not absorb the information. The obvious is the obvious, and if you truly look at it, there's no denial that government itself is just another form of slavery. Have a wonderful day, people.